Today, we're going to be starting a new series on this wonderful map here. Now, technically, not really new. It's what if civilization started in America, which is something I have done. However, um, I did it in a way different scenario. First of all, you notice the Mediterranean Sea, Ocean, whatever it's called, is here. Now, this is to make it a lot more interesting. And you might be like, well, it's just starting in Europe. And to that, I say it's not, because there's nothing going on up here. And also, I've basically kept the terrain um, of America. The only places I think I changed were like Corsica, Sardinia, and then these islands. The problem is I can't really change them back. I regret changing them, but you know, whatever. You can kind of see like Italy is a lot more flat. Now, we'll preface this. Um, Obviously this is probably a desert. I'm just gonna kind of assume. I don't know. Is this a desert or not? Like obviously here, like this is a desert. Whether this is a desert or not, I'm just gonna kind of ignore and be like, I hope it's not a desert. Obviously over here you have giant flat plains in Turkey, which is kind of funny. And then you will still have the Appalachian Mountains, which funny enough cross over to Cyprus. Just to make it clear, this still exists over here. The second thing is, the last time I did this on a very, very small map. I mean, well, not a small map, but like this is a 16K map. Look at the detail on this. Like this is crazy. Um, but yeah, we're going to be looking at what if civilization started in America. Now, if you're just seeing this video randomly and don't know how these work, I recommend watching Ada's Pro's WICSO. However, just a quick rundown. Basically, I, create civilizations on this map. They're signaled by a color. I'll probably end up giving them a name. And we kind of, play out history in a way. However, it is quite unrealistic. Like, obviously in history, you have like 4,000 years. However, we know more about the last 200 years than we do compared to the rest of that year. So, the first civilization, when we start the series, I may not give exact times. Like, I'm not going to be, this is the year zero, this is the year one. But, towards the more modern eras, I might be like, hey, it's 1938, this is World War II, or something. But just a preference, the time scaling might not make sense, and this isn't meant to be realistic. This is all meant to be for a bit of fun. It's not meant to be realistic. But anyway, that is enough of me talking. Let's go ahead and look at this. And I'm actually going to be using this layer to signal the unknown. Now, normally people use a transparent layer. However, I did just steal this from AltSen, who is another WICSO YouTuber. Where we're beginning, we're going to go and begin over here, right over here in this Thessaloniki region. Now, I could have picked a random spot. However, I kind of want to pick here, just because I think this region is pretty good. But nonetheless, we see the creation of our first little group of explorers, which go ahead and explore. And we go ahead and see the creation of our first group, which will go ahead and be this red group over here. Now, obviously, we have the shape of like the Greek peninsula and stuff, but it's the terrain of America, which means there's this pretty nice river here, which honestly, that's a pretty good buff for Thessaloniki. Like this nice river here is pretty nicely placed. Now, I am actually going to go ahead and show capitals, capital cities. Now, for now, they'll probably end up being this kind of size, potentially. However, they will shrink a lot. The way I do my cities is that like size correlates to population. But for now, that is their capital city. And I'll update it at a later time. Now, this group does a bit of exploring, pushing out. I mean, they're mainly kind of settling down, if you will. They explore a lot. Now, this is kind of fun. Like, I'm kind of like, look at the world. Oh my God. Look how tiny that pocket is. Like, I feel like I'm in Europe, but I'm not. I'm in America, which is pretty weird. But anyway, this group will go ahead and do a lot of exploring, as they eventually end up finding some coastline over here, which they're pretty happy about. And we actually go ahead and see our second group end up forming over here this nice like green team, which will go ahead and settle between the river border and right now. But anyway, we're going to see the creation of this green team. And their capital will be right here in between this lake, the ocean, and this river. While up in the north, we see the red team is doing a lot of expansion up here, and they even crossed the Dardanelles Strait here, which is a pretty big accomplishment. But they will go ahead and expand. However, the king of the red team does not want to go ahead and push into the Dardanelles Strait, as they view it like their pagan religion. They kind of view it as like evil. So they will be sticking over here. However, this will kind of cause a bit of a quarrel, as the king doesn't want this. However, one of his sons does want to go ahead and expand in the Dardanelles Strait. However, nothing happens to this. Well, over here, we see that the green team pushes pretty far up and also far down, as they mainly are kind of like a fishing culture. Now, obviously, this universe doesn't make any sense, so I have no idea how, everything works. Like, are there going to be fish here? I don't even know if there's fish in the Mediterranean, but I say there's fish here, and we go ahead and see that this group, uses these rivers as a pretty good natural border. As we see them expand to this natural border, and they go ahead and take over the Ionian Isles, and they even make a little settlement over here in Sparta. Well, speaking of Sparta, we go ahead and see that a Spartan country does go ahead and eventually form down here. Now, these people go ahead and form the Spartan Republic, as they fled from both these countries and were like, hey, the king is, not treating us very well, so can we please go ahead and join you guys? And they'll be like, yep, we can go ahead and form a new country that will be a republic. And finally, over in this region, we see this new Athenian country end up forming. And now what's interesting about this Athenian country is they are actually a matriarchy, which means that they only have queens, which I will probably end up forgetting. So I'll probably say the king of this country eventually. But it is actually a queen running this country. But this Athenian country will do pretty well for itself, expanding, quite nicely. Now, in terms of names for these countries, I'll probably just end up using the European name. In some regions, I'll probably call them the American name. But I think it'll be kind of funny, like we got Nebraska versus, Macedonia over here. Pretty interesting. Although there's no Nebraska here, obviously. But I mean, just like in general, that's an example. But anyway, we see that the Macedon ruler does a lot of his expansion, pushing all the way over here. I mean, by far the biggest country. And it's at this point where we see a pretty big exploration go up into here. And honestly, how are these borders kind of like perfect? Like, why have I got myself an Albania here? The green team will continue to just snake up the coastline up here, but they'll probably end up stopping here as they're kind of very stretched, and they'll take over this land, which honestly you could call Albania. I don't know why it's not filling properly. That's a bit weird. Here we go. But nonetheless, we go ahead and see that the green team is looking interesting. But anyway, down here, we go ahead and see that the Peloponnesian Peninsula, however you pronounce it, is fully divided between all these powers. As it ends up looking something a bit like this, unfortunately, Macedon, you don't get any land. But we do see that Athens also gets some land, as Athens is kind of cut off. Well, up over here, we see that one son is doing a pretty good job at expanding over here, and they actually figure out, this weird looking like thing. What's going on over here? Like, is this the edge of the world? I don't know. But we go in to see that there is a clear divide between the continents. And it's at this point where the king of the red team is going to unfortunately fall ill and die, and he's going to go ahead and leave his kingdom. Into his older son. However, his younger son is going to go ahead and cross the Dardanelles Strait over here, pushing the borders of the red team pretty far up. Now, not that far up, actually. We haven't explored there yet. But nonetheless, this new son is going to go ahead and make himself a pretty nice state over here. And then he's going to go ahead and rebel as we go to see the creation of this nice blue team over here. What would you call this country? Maybe you could call it the Dardanelles country. That's what I'm going to go ahead and call it. As this Dardanelles country will have its capital on this river near the Dardanelles. Maybe I'll put it here. You know what? I'll put it there. That makes the most sense. Right here, the Dardanelles country will set up its capital on the Dardanelles Strait. Well, over here, we go ahead and see the first proper ships lead to basically the full discovery of the Aegean Sea. And we go ahead and see that Athens distincts itself as a decently strong naval power, as they do go ahead and set up a colony over here in Anatolia, which is a pretty big colony. Now, would they be called colonies all the way back when? Probably not, but I'm calling them colonies now, so whatever. We also see that Sparta sends out, some of its own sailors. However, most of them never return. But we actually do see that the green team does go ahead and discover a brand new landmass that we know as the Italian Peninsula, but they don't, which they go ahead and colonize. And we see that the red team does go ahead and fully incorporate all this land as they continue to become a very strong country, expanding quite a lot. Well, down here, we see that Sparta does go ahead and fully discover the island of Crete. and they go ahead and incorporate it. Now, Crete's probably bigger than Sparta itself. What does that say? 1,500 compared to 2,000. Never mind, but you know it's close enough. And I also haven't given these countries capital cities, so let me go ahead and do that. Sparta's capital will be right here. Well, Athens' capital will be right here in between this river and the coastline. While over in Anatolia, we see continued exploration take place as these people realize that this is probably the best place to live so far. I mean, they have this giant Anatolian peninsula, which for all they know could literally continue going. However, if we turn onto the map, we can see that it doesn't. You're going to see how crazy this looks. But nonetheless, we see that the Athenian country rapidly expands their colony, pushing up to this river over here, as they go ahead and sign a peace treaty with this blue Dardanelle country to go ahead and divide Anatolia like so. Well, down here, we see that Sparta does a bit of island hopping and takes over the island of Rhodes, and actually establishes their own little colony down here, pushing pretty well along these borders. Actually, they do go ahead and get a pretty big colony or overseas territory, whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of looking like Sparta's just kind of blocking everyone here. They're just like, you cannot leave the Aegean Sea. I will not let you. Anyway, over here, we see that the blue team has a pretty big chunk of expanding, and they actually realize that, wait a minute, there's a sea over here. And they will go ahead and expand to meet up with this sea, pushing their borders out quite a lot, like so. Now, I actually hate these borders so much, I'm going to redraw them. Now, I changed it. This border actually looks really ugly still. They don't go ahead and meet up with the sea. Guys, I tried my best. Okay, leave me alone. No hate comments, please. But nonetheless, we see that the green team is doing a pretty good job of exploring Italy over here, as they do go ahead and establish a pretty large. I mean, this land's probably bigger than their land. But they do go ahead and push their border up to this river here, like so. Now I don't know why the rivers in America are like straight lines. Like, what's going on here? But nonetheless, they do go ahead and push up to that border. Well, up north, the Macedonian country continues to search the limits of what is going on up here, pushing in to modern day like Serbia, Bulgaria, etc. Now, what's interesting is that the left side is the proper borders, but the right side, like, there's no Romania up here. Like, we've got a Bulgaria, a Serbia, maybe a Hungary, if you really think about it, but like, not really over here. But nonetheless, we actually see that more people are unhappy with the red team, and we go in and see that some of these people end up breaking off to form this nice pinkish team. This is going to be Montenegro, and they will go ahead and push their borders up to this river if I can be asked to draw it in. And they will end up looking something like this, and they will go ahead and place their capital along this river. For the next event, which will probably be one of the last events, we're actually going to be looking at a war as we see the red team troops have crossed the border over into these Albanian lands. Now, they will do pretty well. The red team is the strongest country here. What did I call them? Macedonia. They're the strongest country. And they will do pretty well, and there'll be kind of a stalemate here as the green team retreats to their like river borders down here. Well, down here, we see that Sparta sees this as a prime opportunity to, I guess, well, get kind of Sparta. And they will go ahead and, with pretty good ease, take over this land. They will also go ahead and take over this southern Ionian island. And it's at this point where we go ahead and see that the colony of the green team will go ahead and break away as this nice teal color. However, this country is very unstable, and the people didn't really want to break away, but the government broke away, or I guess the leader, king, whatever. But nonetheless, eventually the green team is going to go ahead and be forced into a peace treaty, which they will go have to give over basically all occupied lands. I don't really know if they're going to not give over all of it. So we go ahead and see that the red team, the Macedonian team, does go ahead and get a coastline. Well, over here, explorers continue to explore over here until eventually they go ahead and realize that, maybe this is more than one lake. So, that's pretty cool. And we go to see the creation of this nice orange team over here, which will quickly take control of this region. Now, I don't really know what to call this. I'll probably look it up. Pretty sure there's like a pretty big city here, so maybe I'll name it after that city. Okay, I just looked it up. It's Detroit. So this will be known as Detroit, I guess. Which obviously doesn't make any sense, but whatever. It doesn't make any sense. But they will go ahead and set their capital up over here in, well, Detroit. And this Detroit country we'll go ahead and do a pretty big portion of exploring, and they'll find parts of the upper part of the Michigan region. Okay, I've just drawn in some new borders, and I absolutely hate them so much. I want to cry. Um, Turkey just looks so weird. I mean, this isn't Turkey, but this Dardanelle country has become super big. But what the main focus was the Detroit country expanding, which they did a pretty good job of, looking something like this. Well, over here, this southern Italian country will take all of southern Italy. And for the last event of this video, we're going to be looking at some border cleaning up, particularly with the red team. And there we go. These are the new red team borders, and I think that this is where I'm going to go ahead and end this episode. Now, I hope you enjoyed. Any suggestions, let me know in the comments. Next episode, I will update the cities map, probably add a few major cities, although I say cities, I mean, it's so early on that there aren't any, probably big villages, but we're just going to imagine artificially that they somehow have them. And I will go ahead and add a religion map if I hadn't said that already. And anything else? Ideology map, probably. Alliance map, maybe, although I don't have any alliances. But that is it for this video. And let's go ahead and zoom out our world map, which looks like this, zooms in on America. And if we zoom out, we can see how minuscule this really is.